The sound of roaring engines filled the small town of Cedar Ridge every Sunday afternoon, and with it came the same whispers that always followed her. There goes Ava Miles, the one who threw her life away for a biker. At the cafe window, people would point and shake their heads as she passed by, her once white sundresses now replaced by worn jeans and a leather jacket that smelled faintly of gasoline and freedom. She didn't care what they said, or at least, that's what she told herself every morning. But when the lights were off, and the silence crept in, the words hurt more than she'd ever admit, because once, Ava was the town's golden girl. The daughter of a banker, she had scholarships, a bright future, and a world that seemed to open its doors just for her. But all that changed the day she fell in love with Mason Cole, a Hell's Angels rider with scars on his hands, tattoos on his arms, and a past he never talked about. He had no money, no degree, and no direction, yet he had a heart that made her feel safe when the rest of the world made her feel small. Still, love came with a price. Her parents disowned her. Her friends stopped calling. Her once bright world became gray and lonely, except for Mason, the only one who stayed when everyone else walked away. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and love that defies the odds, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Midnight Reports right now. Because this story might just remind you why love is still worth fighting for. Life with Mason wasn't easy. They lived in a small one-bedroom trailer near the edge of town. He worked nights at a repair shop, and during the day, he helped his biker brothers fix up old bikes. They didn't have much: a flickering stove, an old couch, and a beat-up motorcycle parked outside that Mason swore he'd rebuild one day. But to Ava, it was home. The world saw a reckless biker, but she saw a man with tired eyes who always gave his last dollar to help a friend. Mason would come home covered in grease, yet he'd smile when he saw her, holding her face like she was the only beautiful thing left in the world. They didn't have luxury, but they had laughter, warmth, and a quiet peace that money could never buy. Until the storm came one night, Mason didn't come home. Ava waited, pacing by the door as the clock ticked past midnight. The phone finally rang, and her heart stopped when she heard the sheriff's voice. Mason had been in an accident. A semi-truck ran through a red light and hit his bike head-on. She raced to the hospital, rain soaking through her jacket, fear shaking her to her core. When she reached him, he was unconscious, tubes running through his arms, his face bruised and pale. She held his hand and whispered, "Please don't leave me. You promised me forever." Days passed. Bills piled up. The shop refused to pay his medical leave, and her own job at the diner barely covered food. The whispers in town grew louder, crueler. She chose that life. That biker ruined her. Some laughed when she walked into the grocery store, others pitied her. Still, she never left his side. Then one evening, a man in a dark gray suit appeared at the hospital. His shoes gleamed, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Cole," he asked softly. "My name is Richard Hale. I represent the estate of Benjamin Cole." Ava frowned. "I don't understand. Who's Benjamin Cole?" The man looked at her gently. "Your husband's grandfather." That name hit her like thunder. Mason never talked about his family. He only once mentioned his father left when he was a child, and his mother died when he was 17. Beyond that, he said there was nothing worth remembering. Mr. Hale continued, "Before Mr. Benjamin Cole passed, he left specific instructions in his will. Should his grandson ever be found alive, the entire estate would be transferred to him." Ava felt her knees weaken. "Estate," she whispered. "Yes, ma'am. The Cole fortune, an inheritance exceeding $28 million. The room went silent. She thought it was a cruel joke. But when Mr. Hale handed her the documents, her trembling fingers traced Mason's full name, Mason Benjamin Cole II. Her husband, the broke biker, was heir to one of the oldest fortunes in the state, but Mason didn't know. He had spent his whole life believing his family abandoned him, unaware that his grandfather had spent decades searching for him. After a bitter family split, weeks later, Mason woke up. His first words were, "Ava? Am I dreaming?" She laughed and cried at once, kissing his hand as she told him everything. At first, he refused to believe it, but when Richard returned with proof, the family ring, the legal documents, the photographs of him as a child, his silence said everything. 4 days, Mason barely spoke. He stared out the window, lost in thought. "All those years," he muttered. "I thought I wasn't worth anything." Ava placed her hand on his chest. "You were always worth everything. With or without the money. After Mason recovered, life changed, but not overnight. He inherited his grandfather's estate, a grand countryside house, acres of land, and enough wealth to erase every hardship they had faced. But instead of buying luxury cars or expensive clothes, Mason made a decision that shocked everyone. He rebuilt the old repair shop and turned it into a free motorcycle school for veterans and struggling teens. The same people who mocked Ava began to whisper again, but this time with guilt. They watched as the broke biker became a community hero, donating to shelters, hiring locals, and building a foundation for accident victims. Ava stood by his side every step of the way, her quiet strength now recognized as grace, not foolishness. One afternoon, the mayor invited them to a town ceremony. The same cafe that once gossiped about her now displayed her picture beside Mason's, Cedar Ridge's kindest couple. When Mason walked to the stage, he looked down at Ava and smiled before saying into the microphone, "Money doesn't make you rich. Love does. I learned that from her." Ava's eyes filled with tears. The applause that followed was thunderous, but what mattered most was the way he looked at her, the same way he did when they lived in that tiny trailer, surrounded by nothing but hope and love. But behind all the admiration came a truth that stayed quietly between them. The fortune didn't change who they were, it just gave them the chance to show the world what love could look like when you don't give up.